Yum, yum. It's time for a tasty and refreshing snack.
You know who I can do without? I can do without the people in the video store.
Which ones?
All of them. They never rent quality flicks. They always pick the most intellectually devoid movie on the racks.
And now, on with the show.
They come from a dying world. They drift through the universe, pushed on by the solar winds. They adapt, and they survive. The function of all life is survival. Sleep. 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 From deep space. Sleep. The seed is planted. Sleep. Sleep. Terror grows.
Matthew! There's something in the air, and it feels like fear. There's something in the night, and it seems like terror. There's someone in your bed, and it looks like you.
Mommy?
Life will be simpler now. The only thing missing,
Mommy?
will be you.
Mommy?
What's the matter, honey? What's the matter? There's Mommy. She's right there. What happened?
I'm seeing people at the infirmary exhibiting paranoia. People afraid to sleep.
Get in bed.
Hey guys, what's going on? You are listening to ThisWeekInGeek.net's Loose Cannon, and I'm one of your video store clerks, Mike the Birdman, but I'm not alone as I bring in regional manager extraordinaire, the guy who comes from the good side of town. I'm joined by one of our other co-hosts on this show.
Hello, sir.
Yes, that is David Denoyer of Do You Even Movie, which you should be checking out on your favorite podcatching app, which he does with Enrique Couto. These were the guys behind Welcome to Primetime, a Freddy's Nightmares podcast. They've just launched a new podcast in the last couple of months of Do You Even Movie. Yep. And right now, as of this recording, they're going through snow movies.
Yes,
so
we
depending
are.
depending on when you hear this, I'm not sure what episode will be out because I don't know when these episodes gets posted because the magic of the internet and posting. So originally we were going to do a couple of episodes before Christmas, but as you can imagine, the holidays just overwhelmed everybody.
Yeah.
Schedules got all messed up, but we were able to get together to record a couple of episodes, and David has suggested these two flicks that we're going to watch tonight. And normally I would have brought on Aaron for this one, but Dave, I always challenge him, show me something I've never seen before. And tonight was something kind of cool where we took a look at remakes, and I haven't seen the original of this. So I'm going to go back and rewatch the original from 1956, probably at some point in the next couple of weeks. But we're going to be talking about the Invasion of the Body Snatchers. We watched the one from 1978 with Donald Sutherland, and we also watched the one from 1993 with Forrest Whitaker and
Kevin Terry. Meg Tilly, directed by Abel Ferrara. It's a wild flick, and one that I really, really enjoy. So when we both agreed on this, I was pretty excited because that gave me the opportunity to finally see the 78 version.
Yeah, it's been one of those things I've seen for literally decades. I've seen the famous scene where you see Donald pointing at the screen and doing that high-pitched scream. And I always wondered what the context of that was. And obviously, if you're any kind of a sci-fi nerd, you've always heard about pod people and all this shit. And it was something that I've been super curious about to watch these. And again, Because I've seen remakes of The Thing, I've seen the remakes of Evil Dead, so I haven't seen a lot of sci-fi, or I've seen more horror movie remakes than I've seen sci-fi remakes. The only other one I can think of off of the top of my head was The Fly by Cronenberg in the 80s as well.
God, those are great too. I love the Fly movies.
Yeah, I first saw those, I think it was a couple of summers ago. I think Alex showed me them. And I really like the first one. And oddly enough, also stars Jeff Goldblum.
Yes, it does.
Seeing Jeff Goldblum in this one was totally friggin' wild too. I didn't expect that. So I guess to my first experience with Body Snatchers, it doesn't go that deep, unfortunately. Like, it's always been on the peripheral of my radar, and I can remember very vaguely. It was either a book or a magazine, but I remember like I said, that iconic picture of Sutherland pointing and doing the high-pitched pod people scream at the camera, and then it pans to Nancy Cartwright going, no. And again, it's just one of those things where my knowledge that's just where I have just this huge gap. Mm-hmm. And I've never had the opportunity up until very recently to see the one from the 50s. I've got it available. I just haven't watched it yet.
I literally tried to watch it a couple nights ago. Actually, when I finished watching Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the wonderfuls of technology, you can literally search any movie on whatever device you use, whether it's a Roku or an Amazon Fire Stick or whatnot, and it'll tell you locations. And Body Snatchers, the original 56 version, is on Paramount Plus right now. So I was like, well, what the hell? I finished 78, I'll go into the 56. And I'll be damned if my Fire Stick was just not acting up with Paramount Plus specifically and would not let me watch it in the bedroom. And I was like, well, I'm comfy in bed, so I don't want to go out to the living room, but it's going to be on my watch list. The one thing I will say, just to get it out of the way real quick, is 1956 Invasion of the Body Snatchers is not hailed as the best version. It actually is the 1978 version that is hailed. 56 does have a lot of respect, and people do enjoy it. And the biggest takeaway from both films in regards to 78 and 56 is Kevin McCarthy, who plays the main character in the 56 version, actually appears in the 78 version as that crazy guy that almost gets hit by Donald Sutherland, and then Sutherland rounds the corner and he's been taken out by who knows else. But that's Kevin McCarthy, who many will know from Piranha as well as the villain in UHF. And
I thought that was that guy.
Yeah, he's the main character in Invasion of the Body Snatchers from 56. So he made an appearance in 78 as the crazy guy that was like, it's coming, and then, dies quickly after. But I thought that was a nice little nod there. So yeah, I do want to watch it. Believe it or not, I've actually read the novel, but it's been so long ago, I could not tell you a damn thing about it.
See, I want to say I've read the novel too, but I think I'm getting it confused with The Mind Parasites by Robert Bloch, which ties into the Cthulhu mythos in some weird kind of way.
Yeah.
I've got this memory in high school reading something like that. My buddy Liam loaned me a book, or either that or I bought it at like the used bookstore for like 50 cents or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's one of those sci-fi movies that I think a lot of people want to say they've seen, but really haven't, unless you're kind of that old school sci-fi nerd, which Aaron and Alex definitely are. Like, their movie knowledge definitely is superior to mine, and definitely you three would definitely get along. And it's just one of those things where, like I said, I've just never had the opportunity. In fact, come to think of it, I don't think I ever remember seeing it for rental in my old hometown. I used to live in a little place called Owen Sound, and at all the video stores, I don't think I ever saw it. I'm pretty sure I saw the 93 version on the shelf. I vaguely remember it maybe being in theaters, but I don't know whether ours had it for very long. So where does your history with the 78 movie come from?
So my history with 1978's Invasion of the Body Snatchers, like I said, I just watched it for the first time a couple nights ago, but I've known about this movie for a long time. I think, honestly, my distinct first memory of being made aware of the remake was probably in junior high. My old junior high used to have had a library, of course, like all the high schools do. And they had a book in there that was all about horror films, probably dating up to, I would say, early mid 90s or so. So you had a lot of your classic monsters and stuff in there, and then you got into a little bit of the golden age of slasher and the sci-fi boom and all that stuff. And I distinctly remember seeing a picture from the 56 version of Invasion of the Body Snatcher, and then, on the page over from it, they had the infamous one that you and I have spoken about already of Donald Pleasance with his shriek and pointing and everything. And I was like, oh, or not Donald Pleasance, Donald Sutherland. And I was like, oh man, that looks interesting. But to be perfectly honest, it was one that just, I don't want to say it never really interested me, but it was never high up on my radar in regards to like an immediate need to watch. Like, I never really heard a lot of people telling me that this was such a great horror film, great sci-fi film. So it kind of stayed off to the side. And then it wasn't until about, I think 5 years ago, Scream Factory released it through their Shout label. Released it through Scream Factory label, and I saw the casting on it, and I was like, "Holy shit!" Like Jeff Goldblum, Donald Sutherland, directed by Philip Kaufman, and it was one of those movies that just kind of was like, "Okay, I'll get to that." And yeah, I unfortunately never got to it. I know many a times I had the DVD, readily available for me to rent or buy, and just never really got around to it. But I think it was over the last couple years. I've gotten back into a lot of those classics on my list that just haven't been hit yet, because I've got a Letterboxd account now, which is helping me to keep track of my watch list. So when you suggested Body Snatchers as our remake start off, I was like, well, this is a no-brainer then. And luckily, this thing's readily available right now. I watched my personal version of it on Prime, on Amazon Prime, and here in the U.S. So, and also it's getting a 4K now too. But Body Snatchers was something I always knew about, because I would watch movies that were very much like it. Like, I'm a huge fan of The Faculty from the 90s, the Robert Rodriguez high school movie with like Elijah Wood and Josh Hartnett, where the school gets invaded by the aliens. That's very Body Snatchers-esque. But like, that's kind of where I fell at, was I was into a lot of the movies that like were definitely inspired by it, but then I never went back to the original source material. And now that I've seen this, I'm also just to the point where it's like, well, shit, do I want to watch that one that's The Invasion from 2008, which is also a remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers? Because I'm super curious now, because I've been a huge Body Snatchers fan, the 93 version, for several years now. And yeah, I just never got around to it. So once you suggested this, I was like, well, let's knock it off the list. And I was so excited to watch it, and it did not disappoint at all. I mean, what a generally unsettling and just scary movie, but also just acted superbly.
Yeah, that's one thing that I definitely want to highlight during this. The acting in the 78 version is something I did not expect, because a lot of 70s movies for me, they don't always hit. Like, I've seen stuff like Logan's Run that I really enjoyed. I've enjoyed the
big Logan's Run for myself.
Dawn of the Dead 1977, and I've seen a few other things in there, but my 70s movies is very, very lacking. That isn't Star Wars or like Alien or something.
Yeah.
So maybe I just need to be exposed to more. But the one thing that I really notice about this one, it's the atmosphere. Like the way this thing builds tension, and it foreshadows things, and just it's generally creepy at times to build this era of paranoia, like seeing the world slowly getting taken over. And when they're wandering the streets of San Francisco and everyone just kind of turns their head at the same time, and there's nothing behind the eyes there, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that's something to get your background actors and performers to perform in such a way that it builds that sense of palpable dread. That's a sign of an astounding director. That's really good casting, because most of these guys could have just walked off the street and this could have been just a paycheck.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm giving them a little too much credit, but everything that involves the pod people, like looking like somebody else, it's genuinely really disturbing. The only part where it breaks immersion, and I'm going to have you break the plot down because you're so much better at it than me. There's one point where there's no other way to describe this, where Spock gets locked in a fridge.
Yeah.
And he's banging on the glass, and he makes this face. That's the only time it breaks immersion, because it's so goofy looking.
Yeah.
But other than that, there's one moment right at the end where Donald Pleasance, or not Pleasance, Donald.
So you did it too. Don't worry.
Yep. And I can't remember who's the actress who plays Elizabeth.
2 seconds, because Brooke Adams is the one that I was falling for while I was watching this. Yeah, that's Elizabeth.
Yeah, she is gorgeous.
She's a cutie.
And there's a moment where they know their time is starting to run out. Like they know literally it's game over at any moment, and Dave will explain why. And it's just this moment where they declare their love for each other, and she dies in a very graphic manner, and he breaks. And it's weird because my experience watching Sutherland, I haven't seen him in a lot of things outside of the Puppet Masters, which is sort of Body Snatchers adjacent.
I know, and it's funny you bring that up too, because that was one when I was watching this that I was like, man, this is so much better than the Puppet Masters. And I don't dislike the Puppet Masters, but man, like there's just something about a young Sutherland in this movie that just had my attention the entire time just with his performance.
He has this confident, quiet sex appeal that's very distinctly 70s.
He's just got a charisma about him. Like even when even when he is talking to the kitchen staff at the beginning about this is a rat turd. No, that's a caper. No, it's a rat turd. No, it's a caper. If it's a caper, you eat it. And it's just, and the whole time that he's having his flirtation with Elizabeth and they're cooking dinner and everything, he's just got this charisma about him that once he really gets involved into the story, which he's not disinvolved at all from the beginning, but like once he is part of the solution, trying to figure out what they can do and everything, you just are 100% behind him just because he just commands the screen with this performance.
Oh yeah. And like, this is definitely, this is the best thing I've ever seen him in. The only other thing I've really seen him in are the Hunger Games movies where he plays President Snow, which, okay, fine. But this is, from what limited stuff I've seen, definitely the performance of his career. And it's so mesmerizing. And like I said, he's got a charisma, he's got a sexiness to him. And it's not like, he doesn't have the Magnum PI stash, so to speak, but he wears it so well, and it's not overbearing. You believe that these two have been co-workers for a while, and there's been something under the surface. And when they realize the end of the world is there, and her and Elizabeth's boyfriend is no longer a person anymore, and she needs someone to turn to. I don't know. There's something about that I genuinely really enjoyed. And then Jeff Goldblum shows up. His performance, he is always Jeff Goldblum in everything that he does. I've never seen him in any kind of a subdued role. Maybe The Fly is the most subdued I've ever seen him. But he's always one step away from the Grand Master in Thor, or 2 steps away from Dr. Malcolm in Jurassic Park. It's so weird.
Well, and Sutherland, for the record, this is the same year he does Animal House.
Oh my
78's the same year as Animal House, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and 5 years after one of his biggest movies that a lot of people know him from and remember him from, called Don't Look Now, which is a horror film. Very good psychological horror film. But yeah, I mean, at this point in Sutherland's career, I mean, he's just going on his way up, because we get into 1981. That's Eye of the Needle, which is another movie he's really well known for. Heaven Help Us in 1985. And I mean, it just keeps going up from there. Lock Up in 1989. So, I mean, he's already pretty well established at this point, from MASH and Johnny Got His Gun, Don't Look Now. So casting him in this after Animal House, Kentucky Fried Movie, like brilliant move. I mean, he's definitely a sex appeal at this point.
So I guess let's go summarize the movie, and then let's talk about some of the cool things that really happened during this, because I think this is such a neat setup for a sci-fi movie that I'm surprised no one thought of it first.
Yeah, so the IMDb synopsis says, when strange seeds drift to Earth from space, mysterious pods begin to grow and invade San Francisco, replicating the city's residents one body at a time. My synopsis is basically you have an alien invasion that occurs by the simple nature of pods that seep into botanical plants. Once the botanical plants are gathered or begin to grow, they can infect people once they sleep and basically duplicate a lifeless, emotionless version of themselves that will eventually make the original version of them deteriorate.
One of the things I liked about it too is you see little nods to this, because as Dave was explaining there, it talks about this interstellar spore that spreads. There's a newspaper, and you blink and you miss it. It talks about spider silk pods blanketing the city, and you realize the entire city is fucked. If you were outside or if you drank it's in the water. Like, there's no way to avoid this virus or this infection. Some way or another, you're already infected. You just don't know it yet. And the second that you fall asleep near one of these pods, it begins to duplicate you. And that is such a great idea for a bad guy. Basically, you're not only fighting this interstellar monster, you're fighting yourself, because you have to sleep. I mean, we're both fans of Nightmare on Elm Street, and we both know you can only stay awake for so long. I mean, at one point in the movie, they start taking speed to stay awake. And at one point, Elizabeth and Matthew are like, oh man, I've got these amphetamines. How many should I take? It says, take 2. And he looks at her without missing a beat. Take 5.
Take 5, yeah.
Yeah, and it's intense too. And you see how these pods react to, like, they start stealing your memories. They start forming these embryonic bodies. There's a point where Nancy Cartwright discovers a half-formed version of her husband, Jeff Goldblum, in this mud spa that they're running. And like, when did he get infected? And he's like, oh my God.
The paranoia wastes no time at all in this movie. Like, you start off with a very creepy opening with the atmosphere of seeing the pods kind of start to fall out of the planet they're on and go straight into Earth. You have the effects of the pod that are still as effective today as they were in the 70s. I mean, even the practical effects in this still work. And the camera work itself is super unique. I mean, the shot of the house in the opening with the tilt as she goes into it, right before we meet Donald Sutherland's character, the camera's at a tilt and the house is at a tilt, which already makes you uneasy, because you're like, okay, why is that shot like that? And why am I seeing something not sitting the way it's supposed to? It's because literally the first shot we see once we get to San Francisco is these flowers starting to grow. And then what happens? The kids run up and start picking the flowers, which immediately you're just like, oh man, those kids are fucked. So, and then in a cameo role, Robert Duvall is a priest that's swinging with these kids on a swing on the playground and just looking emotionless and creepy, watching these kids pick these flowers, because you can already kind of, decipher that Duvall as this priest has already been taken over. And he's watching this all unfold right before it. So once you have those plants come into the eyesight and the kids are picking them, and Elizabeth comes up and picks one and takes one home, you immediately are already into, shit, this is not wasting any time. Like, we are getting into this invasion right off the bat.
Yeah, like, and the thing is, like, about this thing, you can't avoid it. Like, it's literally everywhere. And like, there's a point where Matthew falls asleep in the garden as they're trying to run from these things, because he falls asleep outside. Yeah. And he starts to see pods of him and Elizabeth form, and he kills them. And I was surprised how brutal that was. Like, he takes like a garden hose, starts beating them. And there's one point, I love this. He picks up the phone. There are a couple of points where he tries to call the authorities. And he's like, hey man, something's fucked up here. And he keeps getting blown off. They don't believe him, but he calls the cops one time, and he's in his apartment with him, Nancy Cartwright, and Jeff Goldblum, and Elizabeth.
Veronica Cartwright, not Nancy Cartwright, by the way.
Sorry, Veronica Cartwright. Sorry, not Bart.
No, you're fine.
Simpson.
The first time you said it, I was like, wait a minute, Bart Simpson's in this? And I'm like, oh wait, no, Veronica Cartwright.
Veronica Cartwright. So he calls them and he's like, Mr. Purnell, the authorities will be on their way. He's like, I didn't tell you my name.
How do you know my name? And then you have Goldblum behind him like, Matthew, hang up the phone. Like, they already know that shit is going awry. And I think, honestly, the best thing about the paranoia in this film is it's a slow build, but also it isn't. It's a slow build in regards to figuring out who you can trust and how wide the invasion's gone. Whereas with Elizabeth, like, you know, she comes home with the plant and she's talking to Jeffrey, played by the great Art Hindle, who is in Black Christmas. One of the guys, that's where I know him from mostly. But, you know, she's talking to him, but he's got his headphones on. He's watching his basketball game. He can't get a word in. You know, she can't get a word with him edgewise because he's just so focused. And then what's crazy is, like, literally the next morning, she wakes up to him sweeping up something that we never see, but we also don't see the plant that she was telling him about in the previous scene, because that's gone and infected him, and he's probably either sweeping up his counterpart or the excess of the plant when it busted out and took him over. But at the same time, too, you know, she immediately realizes that something is wrong with Jeffrey. Jeffrey is taking this trash out to the curb. He's not saying a word. He's carrying the trash can in a very peculiar way. And then as he takes the trash out, you see everyone around him almost doing the same. And also the trash is just what looks like giant heaps of dust bunnies, which, as we find out as the movie goes, are the excess of the pods once they've established the new person. But you get the paranoia right off the bat just with her alone. And then that's what I love about this, is the story is between essentially Elizabeth and Matthew. But as we introduce new characters like Dr. Kibner, played by Leonard Nimoy, or Jack, played by Goldblum, everybody starts getting their own portion of the story, which leads to points where we don't get to spend time with these characters. So when their infection occurs and we see it, or, you know, or we find out that they've turned, like, it's really upsetting because we love these characters.
Yeah, like, one of the questions that I actually went to a bunch of wikis last night, I was like, when was Matthew infected?
Yeah.
Because there's a point right at the end, he goes back to the health department and you think, okay, maybe he's fine. And right at the end where you see Nancy run up to Matthew and he's like, Matthew, and he does the pod people shriek at her.
Yeah.
And it breaks your heart because you're like, if anybody was going to survive, you wanted it to be him.
Oh,
and Nancy is just this character who gets introduced like halfway through. And the pod people's mission, quote unquote, it's not conquest. They're not the Borg from Star Trek where their goal is to assimilate and conquer in search of perfection. But they're not too dissimilar from the Borg in this regard. They seek to survive the spread because that is survival. If you take away race, conflict, emotion, part of the Borg's ethos in Star Trek is you take away emotion, you take away all the things that make the individual, you're left with perfection. So in essence, the pod people are like the organic version of the Borg without, you know, necessarily having huge cubicle shaped starships.
Yeah.
But I was watching that and like, I'm thinking, I wonder if the people who invented the Borg kind of took a little bit of inspiration from this, because assimilation in the pod people world is you fall asleep, but they both still involve tendrils.
Yeah.
Which again, amazing special effects for the time.
No, absolutely.
Now I'm watching this at like 2:00 in the morning last night, and I texted you because there's one moment where Matthew and Elizabeth are running through a park, and there's this bum you see in the beginning of the movie. He's sitting with his dog. He's playing a fiddle. He's having a grand old time. He's running through the park. Most of San Francisco has been taken over by this point. And this bum is sleeping next to a pod, and there's his dog, and they pick it by accident. So about sometime later in the movie, they're trying to hide their emotions so they can blend in with these guys, so they can maybe get out of the city or figure out a plan. And there's this corrupted hybrid of this dog human that's wearing the bum's face. And I read a little bit into it, and it's a practical effect. There's one point where the dog is wearing this human mask, and it manages to stick its tongue out.
The tongue. Oh my God, dude. The tongue is so disturbing.
Like, and I was thinking, holy shit. Like, that is a phenomenal physical effect to get an animal to do that. That was a happy accident that the dog could get his tongue out perfectly.
Yeah.
But like, the mask looks so good.
Well, and I think that goes largely due to the fact that you've got a guy shooting this movie that you may not know his name, but you know his resume. So his name is Michael Chapman. And Michael Chapman is a director of photography starting as early as 1973 with a film called The Last Detail, one of Jack Nicholson's early films. But to give you just a rundown of his resume, Birdman, 1976, Taxi Driver. 1978, The Last Waltz, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. 1979, Hardcore. 1980, Raging Bull. Then he goes on to do Lost Boys in 1987, Shoot to Kill in 1988, Scrooge 1988, Ghostbusters 2 1989, Kindergarten Cop 1990, The Fugitive 1993, Michael Jackson's Bad video he did, Primal Fear, Space Jam, The Story of Us, The Watcher, Suspect Zero. He does a lot of movies that have a style to them that storytell along with the actual screenplay itself. So the fact that you have this guy that knows how to shoot action films, westerns, drama, but also has done really odd movies as well, that brings a strong feeling to this because he knows how to shoot both tension, because movies like Primal Fear and The Fugitive, full of tension. He knows how to shoot odd movies like Whispers in the Dark, Ghostbusters 2, Scrooge, all that zaniness, all that insanity, all that special camera work really builds in both on the paranoia aspect of it, but also just the feeling that everything is at a slant. Everything is wrong. Something is not right, if not anything's right. So when he has that shot of the dog sticking its tongue out, yeah, that's a happy accident, but also the way that is framed, that dog's head is not in the center. It's off to the right a little bit. So then that tongue sweeps into the center, comes back around, and completely catches your focus because you're like, oh, what the fuck is that?
Yeah, like, it was so disturbing. And again, for that time of like cinema, I did not expect that. Like, that's a practical effect I think holds up today.
Absolutely. No, and like going back to his camera work too, the one thing that I really picked up on watching this is he loves to work with images that are not clear, whether it's the frosted glass in Jeffrey's office door or the scene in the bookstore when Sutherland's phoning somebody and Goldblum's behind him and they're for some reason in front of a funhouse mirror, like, or the broken windshield that Sutherland drives the entire movie. Like, he deals with a way of detailing in this movie of not having the full picture of people in that regard. There's always a split image of some sort, whether it's a slant with the camera or the cracked windshield of seeing only pieces of Sutherland's face going through it. Chapman deals with a large detail of making sure that there is obscurity with the image of humans, because that's what we're also going with this entire film, which is what builds up the tension, because you literally do not know who you can trust. And once it gets to a point towards the mid climax, I would say, where they're out in the street and everybody's being handed a pod and that dog comes up, and then that's when they break into the run trying to get away from everybody. There is just the sense there that there is nowhere safe. And if there is somewhere safe, they have to find it, and they have to find it fast before it becomes unsafe. So the detail of him breaking up that image in the multiple ways of showing humans and, displaying these funhouse images and whatnot really plays into the fact that you cannot trust anybody in this movie, even especially with the use of the mud spa, which I thought was a really cool set piece.
Mm-hmm. Like, there's so many things about this movie that just utterly impressed me. And like I said, like the fact that, like I talked about earlier, when Matthew kills the duplicates, when you see Elizabeth's half-formed clones start to form and he puts the pieces together, like it happens when you're asleep and he wakes her up and her body's half-formed.
Well,
and
shit.
It's such a cool
the scene. Yeah, the scene when Sutherland's almost attacked, when he's sleeping out back and that plant just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and is inching towards him, and he's just sleeping as these tentacles are creeping up, and then suddenly Elizabeth comes up and she's like, Matthew, wake up, it's coming for you. And there's just this giant botanical plant just reaching for him right away, and he gets away luckily. But also, again, going back to the cinematography of it, the amount of shots in this movie where they have plants in the shot, but also have it to a point in the camera to where it looks like it's either grabbing onto something or nearing someone. The foreshadowing with the shots in this movie is absolute brilliance. And the botanical plants and everything that they use in regards to the shots of the kids picking the flowers, or the fact that she works for the health department and is analyzing this plant, or the fact that, like, when they go into the mudroom, you know, there's plants all throughout this movie. And the way that they get framed completely goes into a point where if you're not paying attention, you don't realize at one point they're bigger in the frame than the people, which is the ultimate foreshadowing, because we see so many people get consumed by these plants through the film.
Mm-hmm. Like, it's ultimately, like, when I watch this, it's one of those movies where I'm so glad I can watch it with a critical eye. I'm glad that I've got friends that have kind of introduced me to watching movies differently. Like I said, talking to people like you, Aaron, and Alex, and JT and Ken, I'm looking at things a lot differently now. And I'm glad I didn't see this when I was like 20 something, because I think I would have rather dismissed it. And
I'm funny you say that. I felt the same way.
Yeah, like it's so strange. I'm noticing this more and more as I get older. Older movies are really starting to appeal to me now because I'm not expecting flash. I'm not expecting razzle dazzle on screen every frame. Like, I don't need to be, you don't need the jingle keys in front of my face for me to be entertained anymore. Like, when me, Enrique, and James Rolfe did the Hammer horror movies earlier, or late last year, rather.
Great episode, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. I was genuinely impressed by how much I enjoyed the Hammer aesthetic. But if you showed me that when I was like 25, I would have been like, it's fine, but it's no Friday the 13th Part 6, which is a great movie in its own right. But
and I totally relate to that with you on that level, because this is the best way that I can say this is, I think as a teen, I was into action and violence and gore, and, you know, I wanted to get my hands on, you know, the craziest action movies or horror films that I could find. So with that in mind, I'll give you a perfect example. True Romance is a movie that I absolutely love. It's one of my favorite actions from the 90s. Has a great cast, great soundtrack, all that stuff. I've probably seen that movie, I would estimate, over at least 10 times. But I remember watching it a few years ago and realizing just how violent that movie is. Whereas when I saw it as a kid, I was like, oh, that's an awesome movie. Like, yeah, it's violent, but like, it's not that violent. And I think that goes back to what you were saying in regards to, as we get older, we start to see things in a different light, not necessarily just the content of it, but we don't see just something to entertain us. Like, this is an art form. Like, film is an art form. Therefore, you know, it matters who's behind the camera. It matters who's cutting the negative. It matters who is acting in it and everything. So, I cannot overstate enough that, yeah, this is exactly the type of movie that if I would have saw it, you know, say 10 years ago, I would have liked it, but not as much as I do now. Like, there's just so much behind this story, behind the action, behind the development of it all that just really interests me. So getting to watch this, you know, at like midnight a couple nights ago, and, you know, just get involved in the story and care about these characters and not really care about the action so much that takes place, although we get a hell of an action sequence towards the end when Sutherland is like, we're gonna burn this motherfucker down. But no, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think there's an appreciation that comes with these films as we get older, and not necessarily, you know, just, you know, the film itself, but more so the fact that we have it, the fact that it's been restored to a certain point, and also that we get to see it from a whole nother age perspective, etc., makes this more enjoyable process for me in the process of watching movies and just the general enjoyment of watching movies. You know, I go back to things I watch as a kid all the time now, and I'm just like, it is one way or the other. It's either I love it still, or it's fine, but I understand why I liked it. Like, it's seldom do I really like full on hate something, so it's nice to have at least that positivity with it. But at the same time, going back to Invasion of the Body Snatchers, like, yeah, this is a movie I really would not have appreciated until this point in my life. And I think it's because I really dug into the storytelling. I dug into the effects. I dug into the slow burn of the paranoia just sweeping across, because you go along with the characters of, oh, fuck, how are we going to get out of this if we even can?
Yeah, like it's one of those movies that I think it's almost timeless. It's definitely it's definitely definitively set in the 70s and in that Cold War kind of mindset, but it works because paranoia is timeless. Everybody's felt it at some point in their life. And if you can watch this is not a movie where you want to talk with your buddies. This is something you want to watch.
Pay attention.
Late at night, by yourself, late at night, and really absorb yourself in the atmosphere. And I think that's something I'm really noticing, again, as I consume more media as an adult in my 40s. Atmosphere plays just as big a part as special effects.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, like I said, I don't have to necessarily, not everything has to be Roland Emmerich 2012 or The Day After Tomorrow, big spectacle.
Mm-hmm.
Like you think about a movie, like for example, my favorite movie of all time is Aliens by James Cameron.
Mm-hmm.
That movie has everything I want and atmosphere. And this is just a different slice of atmosphere that, like I said, I'm really glad I saw it. I'm going to say this is probably one of my favorite new sci-fi movies I've ever seen. I'd probably put this in my top 25 things that I've seen.
I gave it a 4 out of 5 on Letterboxd, simply because I was just wowed by it. And before we wrap up on Invasion of the Body Snatchers 78, we've got to talk about this ending because, people know about that shot. People know about the meme of Donald Sutherland pointing and everything, but the shocking blow that delivers to you as a viewer. So we get to a point in the story where it is down to basically Elizabeth and Matthew, played by Sutherland, and Adams. And unfortunately, in a chase scene, Elizabeth injures her foot, and she cannot go on. Like, she knows that if she keeps going on, like at one point, even Matthew, Sutherland's character, picks her up and is carrying her, and she's like, "You can't do this. Like, I'm just going to slow you down." So they decide that they're just going to hide in this field for a little bit. And that's when you had said the whole thing about him confessing love and, that they share and everything. And he essentially just watches her disintegrate into the earth. And then he's crying. He's having a fit because, he's lost her. He's still dealing with all the shit that has happened in the last 48 hours. And then on top of that, her double erupts on the other side of him and completely stark naked. So yeah, kids, PG-13 movie from 1978, and you see bare breasts for about a minute long.
Yeah, sorry.
I know. I gotta tell you, like, I mean this in all sincerity. I was very surprised by that, and I was also very gracious because I was like, man, I had such a crush on her during this movie, and this was kind of like the final. Hey, here you go.
Thanks for sitting through the movies, kids. Boom.
Yeah. So, and she's like, come with me, Matthew. It's painless and you don't have to worry about anything. And that's the one thing that I'll say about both of these films as we get into this discussion further. These are not malicious creatures. These are not ones that are out to kill you. They're not out to erase you. They are simply taking over in a sense that is survival, but it's not maliciously. It's not like we hate your kind. It's like, no, we know how to possess your body, so we're going to do it. And like you said, it's completely survival. So like, it's not necessarily a malicious context of we're going to take over the entire world. It's more so it's like, we got to find a new planet or else our species is going to be wiped out. So the fact that you have that sympathy with it too also, delves into this final portion. So she's descended into the earth and she's and then now this double is up, and of course Matthew runs away from it. He finds this greenhouse where they are processing these pods. And in natural fashion, he sneaks through it. He goes up top and he realizes, you know what? If I am going to do this, I'm going to do this. And he just starts knocking down these lights, creating this huge explosions of fire and sparks and everything, which, by the way, did you read the trivia on this point?
No.
So the one shot where he is on the scaffolding and the guard starts charging at him and that fireball comes between them, that was not planned. That was a literal reaction of the light doing that. And, unfortunately, or fortunately, he got out of the way, but one of the stunt doubles apparently suffered some severe burns from that scene. So he's running along this catwalk, going along, burning this whole place down, and gets to the point where literally he's knocked down every light. He's burning the facility. So then for the next 2-3 minutes, we're just walking with him. He comes to the health department and sees that there's people around it, so he doesn't go in it. So initially, we are under the understanding that nothing has happened to him. Everything is good. Then Nancy, Jack, who is Jeff Goldblum, Nancy played by Veronica Cartwright, is like, Matthew. So she starts running up to him because she's happy to see him, and immediately his eyes do the thing, and he points, and the shriek happens. And the shriek is so unsettling and so just, it breaks your heart because you lost one of your favorite characters, but also you realize humans don't win. And that's the story, kids. You lost. With the alien creatures took over, everybody's going to be a pod now. So it is the most bleak ending. And then to add insult to injury, no music over the credits. Completely silent credits, which is a very bold move because this score is done really well as well, too.
Yeah, one of the things I'm noticing about some of the 1970s movies I've seen, they're all very depressing. Logan's Run I saw. There was another one I saw with Aaron. I can't remember. I think Threads, but that was 1980 something.
Yeah,
fuck is that dark?
It's a very dark movie. The BBC Fallout movie, basically. Man, that's a great movie, but that is a heavy movie. But Danny Zeitlin did the score for this movie, and it starts immediately with the fact that you open with that shot of, the pods being born and whatnot, and you just have this eerie music. This is the only composing credit this man has. He has gone on to... Yeah, he's gone on to do Sesame Street numbers and was a writer on the film Deceived in 1991. Excuse me. But other than that, he doesn't have any other composing credits, and I think the score of this film is really, really well done. So the fact that you have just bare, complete silence over the credits is pretty impressive.
Yeah, there's just so much that has done right by this movie. Like I said, folks, if you get a chance to see Invasion of the Body Snatchers 1978, you are in for a fantastic time.
It's such a treat. It is the perfect movie that is the culmination of that 1950s atomic age boom and the 70s. What's the word I want to use? 70s drama, but also just mystery, because nothing is laid out for you 100% as the movie goes, because you have to figure out how the pods are formed, what happens to the original people that were affected by the pods, and how the signs of it show. And the main thing that we completely missed upon in this discussion is you do not have any emotion if you're a pod person. So you're talking about people that are completely dead-faced and emotionless, but also react. So it's really unsettling because it's just the fact that you have somebody that Jeffrey, for example, he loved his basketball games, he loved kissing his wife and everything, and then when she sees him the next day, he's emotionless, and he's like, I have to go to the office. I'll be back. Don't wait up for me. That emotionless grift that they present, and not even a grift, it's just the emotionless presentation that is given to you is so unsettling because everybody loses things that make them human, which is a great point in Leonard Nimoy's character of Dr. Kibner. He does that whole thing with Elizabeth at one point where, he grabs on Goldblum's character and he's shaking him down. He's like, now how did that make you feel? Checking on them and giving the emotional strain. Body Snatchers is the epitome of the 1950s atomic age with that 70s mystery that really just brings home the fact that you can have a good movie with, I don't want to say very little happening, but at the same time, a slow build of paranoia and just absolutely terrifying scenes.
Yeah, it is something that is absolutely worth checking out. Highly recommend you do so. And that brings us to our next film in this double feature. We're going to talk about the remake of the remake from 1993, simply just called Body Snatchers.
Yes.
This movie I was vaguely aware of when it was in theaters, because I seem just to recall advertisements, not trailers in front of other movies, because I would have been too young at the time, but I want to say I saw maybe one or two on television, but I may be misremembering that with the Puppet Masters, which again has just a very similar vibe.
Yeah.
One thing I will say about this, obviously nakedness definitely plays a big point in this. And this was a discussion me and my wife had. So I'm Canadian, you're American.
Yeah.
What is considered underage in your country? It was pointed out to me, underage in your country means under 21. Is that factually correct?
Under 18.
Okay, because there's a couple moments in this particular movie where one of the characters, one of the fathers says, you took my underage daughter out drinking.
Yeah.
And then this same character ends up replicated as a pod person, and you see everything, and I'm thinking, I'm not cool with that.
I'll stop you for a second. See,
okay,
you see everything. You see everything of Meg Tilly. You do not see everything of Gabrielle Anwar, who at this time, mind you, was I think 28. Let me double check. Hang on, because yeah, I have a perfect explanation in regards to this. So Gabrielle Anwar is, let's see, she was born in 1970. So in 93, she would be 23. So yeah, she is of age. Meg Tilly, of course, of age of two, of course. And those are the two that you see nude in this movie.
Yeah.
So Gabrielle Anwar, that is something that actually the IMDb trivia says at one point, was that even though she is meant to be playing essentially a high school student, she was 23 at this point in her career. Now, where this is distinguishing for nudity in films like this in regards to the age, it's not meant to be sexually perverse. It's not meant to be sexually appealing. It's not meant to be sexual at all. We see the fact that when you are duplicated, your duplicate arrives naked naturally because, aliens cannot generate clothing. They're generating the form of human skin and whatnot. So
they're not the T-1000.
Yeah. When she is duplicated in the duplication, pops up and is talking to Tim, it's not meant to be arousing. It's not meant to be, provoking. It's literally a body has popped up because he's trying to wake her up at that point. So I get what she is saying, absolutely. But at the same time, and I get what you're saying too, but like at the same time, it's so not that territory because that's not what the movie is about or even really presents. To be perfectly honest, there's really no sexual appeal in this movie. It is all absolute terror and paranoia once again.
Yeah, like this movie, one thing I did notice almost immediately, one of the screenwriters on this was Stuart Gordon.
Yeah.
And I'm a big Stuart Gordon fan. I love Dolls. I love
Stuart Gordon and Dennis Paoli, which were the two writers on Reanimator.
Yeah, I was like, this is going to be great because I love all of his horror movie stuff. And I want to say I knew someone who worked with him, and I had the opportunity to talk with, or I was going to have the opportunity to maybe talk with Stuart, but he passed away before that could happen. One of my great regrets in my career is I would have loved to have told him how much I enjoyed his work because Dolls terrified me as a fucking child.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this is going to be cool. There are some special effects in this that feel like Necronomicon. And what I mean by that is there are some points where bodies dissolve, and it very much reminds me of Necronomicon Book of the Dead, which would come out the same year. So I would wonder if maybe there was a shared idea in there. Again, I may be reading into that, but I was like, okay, this will still be pretty entertaining. This movie, in my opinion, if it does anything right in some ways, it's got the pacing right, because this movie's only an hour and a half, whereas Invasion was about 2 hours.
About 2 hours, yeah. I think an hour 55, I think, is what Invasion runs at.
Yeah, and it's definitely a slower burn in Invasion, but Body Snatchers definitely feels like a movie that was made in the 90s. And it's the way that it's paced, and it wraps up almost a little too quickly, I feel.
But we have differing opinions on that. We'll get to that.
Yeah, like I don't know, like I don't hate this movie. I'm glad that I saw it. I'm definitely very intrigued how they ended it, especially with, I'll just say this, gunship. I was like, you know what? I'm glad it's one of the things you always hear people say in movies. Well, if they had all this military hardware, well, why didn't they use it? They did.
They did.
And that really made me happy to see. But I don't know. There are parts about this movie I really like, and other parts I really don't. I like the performances by everybody. Seeing the girl who played Kyle from Chucky was kind of a nice surprise. I was like, hey, I know you.
I love seeing Christina Lee's pop up in anything. So I'm super happy about that. But I think also it's important to know that this was a very troubled film in regards of studio involvement. So before we get into that, let's get into the basics of Body Snatchers. So Body Snatchers 93 is the story of a military base that calls on an EPA agent that brings his family to the base because they're worried about the effects of the weapons that they have on the base, essentially, and they want to be investigated to make sure that everything is good. They're set in Alabama. They want to test the possible effects of the surrounding ecological system to make sure military actions haven't affected it. Long story short, this is the start of an invasion, just like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. There are pods already seeping in, but they are solely focusing on this military base. So one by one, everybody starts getting infected, which completely shrinks it down. You're on a military base. You have the conformity element of it. So that's the story of Body Snatchers. And you have the EPA agent, which is Stephen Malone, who is played by Terry Kenny, who some may know from Oz. He's a great actor in a lot of movies I can't think of all of a sudden. But regardless, his daughter is played by Gabrielle Anwar, who was, did you watch it yet, Birdman? Did you watch If Looks Could Kill?
No, not yet.
So she plays the secret agent daughter of Roger Daltrey's character in If Looks Could Kill, but you also have the mother played by Meg Tilly, the son played by Riley Murphy. Along at the base, you have Arlie Ermey that's playing General Pat, Forrest Whitaker that's playing Dr.
He looks weird
Collins.
with dyed hair.
He also looks weird with a mustache.
Yes, it looks like, what the fuck? Anyway, go on.
You have a pretty decent cast in this movie. Christina Lees plays Platt's daughter, and the story is told from the perspective of Marty. That's Gabrielle Anwar's character, and she starts off the narration about them coming to the base. So to get this out of the way as quickly as I can, this movie had really rough studio involvement when it came to the edit. So Abel Ferreira was the director of this movie, and he was originally not going to be involved with it because Stuart Gordon, Dennis Paola, and even Larry Cohen, our buddy from Maniac Cop series, had wrote scripts and screenplays for this film, and Ferrara had found one that he absolutely loved, and that was the one he was going to shoot. Long story short, what happened was initially Ferrara was approached to do the film, and this was like his first major studio film because Ferrara, for those not aware, did films like King of New York, The Bad Lieutenant, Driller Killer. The man's resume goes on and on, but he took a liking to the original story, and he had appreciation for the story. And when things got rough, he fought for the film rather than quit it. So his actual quote is, "We started our film already. We're far enough into the script where Warner Brothers already had the idea of strangers in military camp. You couldn't come up with a worse place or a worse starting point for that film. We did the best we could without telling the guys at Warner Brothers. I was holding on to the original story minus the narration. We had a lot of money and we were out in the middle of nowhere, so it was in the editing that it went south. Dee Dee Allen was a really talented editor at Warner's in charge of all the editing for the films. I mean, I butted heads because I don't like anybody telling me what to do, but we had a pretty good editor ourselves, and we were able to play a game well enough that you've seen the film, right? Right? I'm glad you like it. I like it too, but it could have been better. Sure. Would I love to do a remake? Yeah. So essentially what that details is that he shot a script that is probably, if I had to estimate, Birdman, at least another half hour of footage that we have never seen or has been released. Oh. So the movie was probably a lot different in regards to the storytelling. But when you have studio involvement of that degree, your film can get cut very quickly. And a very good example of that is the Showdown in Little Tokyo film with Brandon Lee and Dolph Lundgren. That movie runs at 76 minutes. It was not shot for 76 minutes. That was supposed to be like a 90-minute to 110-minute action film. So there is a lot left on the cutting floor, just like there is with this. So because of that, I personally feel you have a very faster, tightly paced story of the paranoia spreading. And also, I really like the military base setting for this film. I thought that was a really smart place to put it that makes it so that you have the invasion happen super quickly, but also to a point where it is even more threatening because now you have a species that have access to fucking warfare weapons.
Yeah, like that's something I did like about this. They've changed the setting because if the pod people were to spread more easily by taking out the military infrastructure, that'd be the way to do it. And right at the end there with Arlie Ermery's character, General Collins, or no,
General Platt.
Yeah, General Platt sending them to all the major kind of military bases around the U.S. So the military infrastructure would be taken down in likely a matter of weeks to days to weeks. It would not take long to infect all these bases.
And I think, too, what goes into it is, you start with Marty having her narration about, I knew something was off when we came to military base and whatnot. And when I say narration, she only narrates about 3 or 4 sections of the movie, which I think is a really cool placement of it, especially with the ending, which we'll get to. But, her family stops off at this rest stop. She goes into the bathroom, and one of the soldiers immediately grabs her, puts his hand over her mouth, a knife to her throat. But when she shows fear, he backs off. And he's like, they get you when you're sleeping. You're not safe here. You've got to run. You can't sleep. Like, don't let them get you. So immediately we are served up what is happening with this base within 5 minutes of the movie starting. So once we get to it, we are already uneasy because A, you're on a military base and you're not a military family. You're an environmentalist agent that is sent to make sure the military is not fucking up the ground and the earth all around them. But then on top of that, you have a family. Like, you've got a family with a daughter, a kid, and a mom. So the fact that you have this family unfamiliar with military that's on this military base, but then you also have this immediate of something's going to happen. You and your family need to leave. You're already uneasy. So then when we start seeing the base and seeing everybody, everything seems as normal. Everything's on the up and up. But then slowly but surely we get sinking into something is not right here. And I think the absolute best demonstration of that is the classroom scene.
Yeah, where like he's like the kid Tim, or not Tim, Andy.
Right. Yeah, Andy
is the only kid who paints something different.
Something different. Yeah. So to set the story. So at this point, like, everybody's going about their day. So they send Andy to school, and you're in this classroom, and the teacher's like, "All right, everybody, let's see your paintings." And every kid holds up the exact same painting, which is, just a blob of lines and streaks. Which honestly, the more I looked at it when I was watching it this time around, that's totally the pods. It looks exactly like the pod creations. So she holds up, she's like, "Oh, very good, very good." And then you get to Andy, and Andy has more colors in his has different streaks. And immediately the teacher's just like,
You need to go to sleep, child.
Yeah. And so Andy, we see the next scene is we see him running, which luckily Tim Young, played by Billy Wirth in this, he rides up in his Jeep with his compadre, and he's like, "What's going on, kid?" And he's like, "I'm going home." And he's like, "Where do you live?" And he's like, "I don't know." So, they take him home, and that's how we kind of get Tim as the love interest with Marty's character. But he says this thing about, I didn't paint the same thing, and they wanted me to go to sleep. So immediately that, oh shit, the infection's already started, because if they've already gotten the kids, then the parents are already infected. So now you're essentially just waiting for this to happen. And, speaking to what you said about the runtime, 87 minutes, this movie moves quickly because...
Yeah, it's paced really fast.
Paced very fast. Yeah, no, it works very well. And the pod reveal scene, especially because the lighting and the camera and everything in this just completely works well, which this was Abel Ferreira's usual cameraman, which, oh God, what is his name? Give me a second here. He did like King of New York and all of Ferrara's movie, Bojan Bazali, but also a director of photography that has a resume that includes, Well, we won't hold this against him, but Peter Pan and Wendy, the new Disney Plus Peter Pan movie. But moving down the list as we get to the good stuff. So King of New York, he also has Big Man on Campus, King of New York, Somebody Has to Shoot the Picture, The Rapture, Deep Cover, one of my all-time favorite neo-noirs from the 90s, Boxing Helena, California, Sugar Hill, Surviving the Game. I mean, the guy definitely has a resume that fits the work that is in this movie. Sorcerer's Apprentice, Burlesque, I mean, goes on and on. So he's got a lot of work in this. When they have the scene of the pods where you see the military guys out in the water picking up the pods and there's that blue light and everything, you are immediately unsettled because you know that, oh shit, everything is about to go wrong now, because you're seeing multiple military people picking up these pods, which goes again with the fact that the conformity of a military base is already scary in and of itself. So when you have military people that normally do not show emotion, or they're not supposed to, completely being affected by creatures that don't show emotion, you have no idea what is going to happen, nor who is going to show their true colors, because they naturally don't on the op and up anyway.
Yeah, like, I don't know. There were parts about this I really, really enjoyed. And one of them is where the mother, I think Carol is her name.
Yeah, Carol.
Where she dissolves and the kid walks in on it.
And the first nudity we get in the movie, which is Meg Tilly full frontal from top to bottom. And, you know, that immediately also puts in perspective of, you know, no one's going to listen to a kid. So when a kid runs to his dad and is like, you know, mom's disintegrated, mom's not there anymore. And he's like, well, your mom's on the stairs right there. And he's like, well, that's not mom. It immediately builds up the paranoia for the family, but also the fact that, like, you're like, okay, if it's in the family now, how far is it elsewhere?
Yeah, and there's one line. I love the way the kid delivers it. They're all sitting around the table having breakfast. The dad is having an argument with Marty.
Yeah.
And the little kid, Andy, says, my mommy's dead.
Yeah, my
mommy's
dead. Because because the dad is like, all right, you can, because the kid doesn't want to go back to school like that. I mean, who wouldn't at that point? But anyway, so the kid doesn't want to go back to school. So his dad is like, all right, you can either go back to school or if you want to stay home with your mom. And it's like, well, fuck, I'm going to get infected either way. So the kid just, like, you know, sits there silently. Whereas we pan to Meg Tilly, Carol, who is the duplicate now, and she's just has like a stone-faced look that has just a little bit of a grin, because she knows if the kid stays with her that she'll be able to infect him. But at the same time, too, we also watch this family get infected at one point, which is even more of a terrifying scene.
Yeah, there's another part in it too where she's giving a massage to our main character, Steve.
Yeah.
And he's falling asleep and he's getting the tendrils all over his face, and he starts to wake up and his half-formed duplicate jumps out from under the bed. That's a great special effect.
Well, and that is a great point, because you have Marty who's in the bathtub, and we already see the tentacles start to come down from the top of the ceiling while she's in the bathtub. Then Terry, who is getting his massage and, like, you know, half falling asleep, also being infected by the tentacles. So once Marty wakes up and starts ripping them from her face, and then her duplicate literally falls from the ceiling into the tub and is pretty much fully formed of her. And then she goes in the bedroom, gets her dad and everything, and, you know, his duplicate comes out of the bed, grabs his ankle, and he's just like a half skeleton with fucking Terry Kenny's face on it. Like, it's terrifying, because then we get my absolute favorite line of the movie. So they're all going downstairs and have no idea that Meg Tilly, which is Carol character, has been infected at this point. And she gives the great delivery of, no, Steve, listen to me. Where are you going to go? Where are you going to hide? Where are you going to run? Nowhere, because there's no one left like you. And just that right there demonstrates that, A, they have control of the base, but also things are about to get a whole hell of a lot worse, and there is really no hope for them at this point.
Yeah, and then there's like this great chase scene, and I really appreciated the fact that there were some uninfected people left fighting back. They were using guns and like, come on, follow us, we're gonna cover you.
So Meg Tilly delivers that line at 51 minutes. From this point on, the tension of this film doesn't stop, and we only have maybe a half hour left.
Yeah, like it's basically one big chase scene and one long fight right at the end. And
Yeah.
honestly, this part I really, really enjoy because, like I said, when it comes to pacing, this movie it doesn't fuck around.
No.
And I think that's one thing I really appreciate about this. But in a sense, it kind of works against it because maybe I would liked a little bit more character development, maybe a little bit more tension building in places. But like you're mentioning, this movie had a troubled production, so maybe some of what I want is on some cutting room floor somewhere.
Oh, it absolutely is. Yeah.
Which is, again, unfortunate, but then again, not every movie needs to be 3 hours long. Even the 2-hour thing, which was the average for quite some time, you really have to earn that for it to make sense. Because, like, one of my constant critiques of certain movies is, like, it needed to be about 15 minutes shorter.
Yes.
Or maybe it needed to be about 20 minutes longer. This is a movie I felt like could have benefited from maybe 15 minutes here or there. And I don't necessarily know what I would have liked to have added, but one thing I will say is when they confront Tim, the pod people, there's a great line where he's fueling up the helicopter and they're asking, what are you doing? I'm under orders. Really? Is that so? He's like, we're one big happy family. Happy. What's that, Tim? I'm filling up the bird. I'm doing what I'm ordered to do.
Yeah?
I fucked your girlfriend. And he doesn't react.
He doesn't react. No, I love that because then they're like, all right, no, he's on the up and up. Like, that's fine. That also goes back to the whole scene that we glossed over where Steve, Terry Kinney's character, the father, is out at this field getting samples, and Forrest Whitaker walks up. This is about 10 minutes into the movie, the first time we ever see Forrest Whitaker. There's only two times total that we see him in this movie. This scene and the final scene with him. But this scene in particular, he walks up to Steve and he's just like, "Hey, I know you've been sent out here. I know what you're doing." He's like, "What do you think about this concept of people being afraid to sleep or people being afraid of their families?" Well, I think that's all psychological. He's like, well, if you study some of that, get back to me, because he's already dealing with this on the base. So in reality, we have no idea how long this has happened when they come to the base. But the fact that Marty gets ambushed in the bathroom by that soldier that they later see in the bar, that's clearly infected at this point because he's like, I don't know what you're talking about, but I think you should take her home. Completely emotionless once again. We have no idea when the invasion started at this base, which is even more scary to me, which we'll get to the ending here in a little bit, because that gives us no idea how widespread this is. We're only seeing the storytelling that we're presented with, which is terrifying in and of itself because the overall paranoia of the infection starting in the family is harsh enough. But then as we get to that chase scene that you're talking about where they're gunning him down and every fucking house around them is running at them and shrieking and everything. So when we get to the scene of him filling up the bird and he's like, I fucked your girlfriend. And he's like, all right, he's good. Let him take the bird. So he goes to take the bird out, sees that Marty gets picked up along with Andy and they get taken to this facility. And that's when he, sneaks in. We see Marty's double, which is the other nudity point. But also we find out that, she's completely fine as long as he rips up the other thing, gets her free. They run out. And then we meet Andy, and Andy is running up to them, and he's like, Marty, but before that, we run into Jen, who is Christina Lee's character, and she's walking, or Marty and Tim are walking together, and Jen walks by them, and she's like, well, I saw your brother, and the fucking giveaway is Marty turns around and says, where? And that's when we see Jen do the Donald Sutherland point and shriek, and everybody swarms them once again. So Andy starts running towards the helicopter. They're flying the helicopter out. Andy and Marty and Tim are on the helicopter. And then Andy swarms them and starts tugging on Tim's head like he can't fly the helicopter. So then he's like, throw him out. And I'll shit you not if they don't throw this kid out the helicopter, which of course he's not a kid technically. He's an alien species. But she ejects her brother out of this helicopter as he sinks down and we watch it. And from that point on, we know that there is no going back. And I love that point because every point of the family has been completely wiped out at this point. You have Meg Tilly that they ran from. Steve, at one point, we find out has been infected because they're on this ride, and he's like, you don't have to show emotion, like, and he doesn't show emotion, gets shot, and then he slowly deflates like a balloon. So then when we get to the point of them throwing Andy out of the helicopter, holy shit! Like, this movie takes no prisoners and is completely unsympathetic to any point of humanity, to where it's like, we want to see these two characters survive, but can they?
Yeah, like, it was very brutal when they threw the kid out of the helicopter. Although
the effects don't hold
special
up.
effects, yeah, it's kind of hilarious in a weird kind of way. But I will say, as I say, I'm glad I saw it. I don't love it like you and Enrique do, because I know he wanted to be here for this recording.
His ass is at the Upper Peninsula of Michigan right now in a snowstorm, eating bacon and having a good time. He's okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he'll live, I'm sure. But yeah, like, I'm glad that I saw this. Out of the 3 movies, like I said, I've seen 2 out of the 3.
Yeah.
This one, it's definitely 90s. It feels like it, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. 90s sci-fi is, like, in my opinion, comfort food. You get your 90 to 110 minute movie. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but it's usually worth your time invested in it.
Yeah.
And this is one of those ones I could definitely say, glad I invested in it. Am I going to come back to it again? Probably not. But still, now I have that whole thing. And that got me thinking, does the body snatcher concept deserve revisiting? Because you were mentioning this thing has been remade again in the 2000s.
Yeah. 2008, The Invasion with, I think it's Nicole Kidman and Daniel Craig. But I think before we get into revisiting of that, I think what I really appreciate about this movie is it has a literal the end at it. And the way that it's used. So spoilers, we're gonna spoil Body Snatchers right now, because I want to dictate how much I absolutely love this ending. So they get to a point where they've thrown Andy out of the helicopter and it's just Marty and Tim flying. But before that, as Birdman mentioned previously, we see that they are generally dictating the points of where these trucks are going with these pods. And they're all going to military bases in different states. Ohio, Alaska, Arkansas. All these places are mentioned by Arlie Ermey as these trucks drive past to where they're going to go and keep this infection going. So then we are treated to the fact that Tim and Marty have hijacked this helicopter, fully armed, and they just start blowing these trucks up one by one by one by one. And we see the explosion, we see the impact, and we see them, talking. Marty's narration kicks up, and she genuinely expresses that she has kind of lost her humanitarian aspect, which she started the film with. So once they have done whatever they need to do and what they feel they need to do, they land this helicopter on this military base. And the final shot is we see this pilot with the 2 little beacons, telling them where to land and how to go about the field. And as it's playing, we hear a repeat of Meg Tilly's line that's kind of been, what's the word? It's been
vocally distorted.
Yeah, distorted. Thank you. It's been distorted with the, where you gonna go? Where you gonna run? Where you gonna hide? Nowhere, because there's no one else like you. And then Ferrara, in his ambition, motherfucker puts the end up as they land. And there's this uncertainty with, well, did we really actually fix it, or did the infection already spread before we know it? That's what I love about this movie, is it has the same bleak ending as Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but on a way more uncertain level, because they've come from a different state and are landing in a completely different state now. We have no idea what's around them. Whereas with the first one, that's solely San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have this generalization that, this could be even worse than we realize now, because we've only been with this family this entire time who have now become this woman and her love interest, essentially. So where are we going from this point? So the fact that we also got a 2008 remake of The Invasion, I am curious, but at the same time, A, I haven't heard good things, and B, I remember when that movie came out, and I didn't have interest then, and I don't know if I still have interest now.
I have the vaguest interest in seeing it just because I'm curious to see what they can do with it, given modern technology and different actors.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, I think there's a possibility to make sequels out of this, because I am interested to see how far did the infection spread. Is there a possibility of fighting back against these pod people? Like, there's a point where where the confronting force kind of Whitaker and Ermey's character, General Platt's like, we're not here to destroy you. We're not here to invade you because of whatever. We just want to survive. We just want to give you peace. We don't want to give you conflict. We don't want to have, you don't need to have problems. And it would be very interesting to see what would a war look like between us and them. Like, is it a war of attrition? Like, what do you do? And like I brought up the Borg earlier from Star Trek, where their goal is assimilation and conquering, not for any power base, but to achieve perfection. Whereas these beings they're parasitic by nature, but when they transform, they do have their individual thoughts, but they're still kind of a unity hive mind in a weird thing. Like I said, I'm sure there's people who are sci-fi enthusiasts and people who can discuss this a lot more in depth than me. I'm looking at you, Aaron. But I like the idea behind the pod people more than I thought I would. Yeah. I love the idea of someone being stripped of what makes them them and being replaced by an exact duplicate. I can't remember what the quote was. It might be attributed to either King, Hitchcock, or Lovecraft. And the quote went something along the lines of, terror is when something has been replaced by an exact duplicate. And I can't remember who said that, but I really got to thinking about that quote while I was watching this movie thing. Yeah, having your loved one replaced and something's wrong, but you can't put your finger on it, but they're wrong.
And it's so unsettling. The best example, actually, I'm going to give 2 additional movies to check out for the dear listeners. Technically 3 if you want to go deep. There's 2 movies that came to mind when watching the series that I really enjoy, but B, also made me appreciate more. The Stepford Wives from the 70s, the original version of the Stepford Wives, and there's also the 2010s version that Nicole Kidman was in. That is the same idea of a perfect society from the mind of the creator that develops it. And Stepford Wives is one of those movies, both the original and the remake, that is unsettling in regards to how they go about it, but also presents an idea of general humanization of the species of a human and adds the humanity aspect to it, but also, well, wouldn't it be great if you could live, carefree with perfection and no misdemeanors or anything like that. And then the other movie is, last year I went through the Cornetto trilogy, so Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and The World's End. The first time I watched The World's End, I was not a big fan of it, maybe because I was expecting a film that was like Hot Fuzz or Shaun of the Dead. But The World's End is a great sci-fi comedy action movie that really delivers on the aspect of perfection from the eye of the creator versus what we as humans feel to that, generalization and everything. I think Body Snatchers and Invasion of the Body Snatchers are A, perfect examples of sci-fi horror, B, perfect examples of stories that do not have happy endings but cannot have happy endings, and C, they are films that are time capsules in each of their decades that they're created in that tell us where filmmaking was. Where you have the 78 version is who's who of acting at that point with Sutherland, Leonard Nimoy, Jeff Goldblum, Brooke Adams, and then you have the 93 version that has Terry Kenny, done by Abel Ferrara, written by Stuart Gordon, and even Larry Cohen was on it and whatnot, like I said earlier. But these films present an idea that is terrifying to humans because it's the concept of what if a species came down and saw that we're not perfect, so they made us perfect, and in which case erased us and our originality and our personality and everything? That is legitimately terrifying, because you die, but your image carries on. Like, I don't know what is more terrifying than that.
Mm-hmm. Like, I think the idea is interesting, and I was thinking about this, like, are we due for another remake of this idea? I'm gonna say yes, actually.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree.
And I'm just trying to figure out who I'd like to see take something like this on, because I want someone who I would love a different setting, not the military base and not like some random health department guy. But I like the aspects of both. I mean, I like how in Body Snatchers, he was health department adjacent, the EPA. I think that's a really smart move.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to figure who could do this proper justice. And
I think in that aspect, you have to come from two aspects of it. Do you want the thinking man's film, or do you want the sci-fi thriller crazy, aspect horror film? So if you want the thinking man's film, anybody your A24 repertoire. So Ari Aster, oh God, the guy that did The Lighthouse, I can't think of it right now. 2 seconds. But like your thinking man's movie, I think, is who you would want to helm this if you want a aspect that gives you what's the word I want? I want
that atmosphere of the 78, but
Robert Eggers,
modern.
Robert Eggers, Ari Aster, like those gentlemen, I think, could do something really inventive and creative and really unsettling with Body Snatchers. But then on that same front, I feel like you could have like somebody from the Blumhouse take it, or even somebody, just like not Zack Snyder, but the guy that did the Star Trek remake. I can't think of his name. Bad
AJ
Robot.
Abrams?
Yeah, Abrams. I feel like Abrams could bring a point to Body Snatchers that might be a lot of fun.
Maybe 15 years ago, not now. I
don't know.
I want thinking mans. Like, I really want something deeply disturbing, and I want that slow burn. And I would bring back Sutherland before he dies.
Yeah.
I would make him Kibner.
I'm going to say this may be a stretch, but Jim Jarmusch might be somebody that could bring some life into Body Snatchers.
And what films has he done?
Only Lovers Left Alive, The Dead Don't Die, Coffee and Cigarettes. Jarmusch is one of those filmmakers that I don't love everything, but I appreciate things, especially from the point of the storytelling methods that he does, the humanity that he presents. Jarmusch is somebody that I feel like could bring an aspect of mystery, but also a direct delivery of the horrors that could come with this. But then on that same front, I am also a very, very big fan of Joe Lynch. I think Joe Lynch could do a pretty awesome Body Snatchers movie, to be honest.
I'm going to suggest, and this may be probably me talking out of my ass, but the guy who did the most recent Dune. Villeneuve.
Yeah.
Because I think he gets a lot of psychological stuff. He can deal with big special effects if you want to have that action part to it. But yeah, I want something that's a little bit more cerebral, but when the pod people come, they will come large. I'm not saying it's going to be like the fucking Sandworm and the Sardaukar are coming, but
I'm just going to say this. Cool. We're both dumb for not recommending this, but the gentleman that did Ex Machina, Alex Garland.
Yeah.
He also did Men, Annihilation, Ex Machina, Dread. Yeah. Sunshine. Oh, fuck. Yeah. Alex Garland is who we want to do our Body Snatchers movie.
So, Garland, if you happen to be listening, and if you need some PAs, but yeah, like ultimately, I think every version of this movie we've talked about so far is worth seeing at least once. Yeah. 100% recommended from us here at
Yeah.
Loose Cannon. So as we begin to wrap things up at the video store, me and Dave have a couple of different shows that are going to be cooked up over the next little bit. We've been talking about doing the USA Network's Cabin by the Lake. We're going to be talking about that. We've also discussed about talking about the Critters movies, those 4 movies.
Yes.
There is a TV show. I think I have it somewhere on DVD.
Birdman, just skip it. You're fine. Just don't even bother. Don't even bother. Enrique and I binged it, and it's fine. But the movies are so much fun. It's funny that you brought Critters to me because it's like you've been realizing that I've been using YouTube to listen to Power of the Night, the Critters song, because my partner Allie and I watched it a couple months back, and I don't know what it was about that song, but it's not on iTunes, it's not on Spotify, it's not on Apple Music, so I have literally had to listen to it through YouTube. But I've listened to that song at least 20 to 30 times in the last year. So the fact that you're bringing Critters and that we're going to cover the Critters, not trilogy, it's a saga. Yeah, Critters Saga. I'm very excited. Quadrology, yeah. I'm very excited for it, but yeah, don't worry about Critters: A New Binge. It's fine, but it is bonus feat at best.
All right, then we're also going to talk about the Creep Show movies, which I got a lot of memories with the first 2, but not so much the third one. So we'll be talking about these in the upcoming weeks. I know we're going to have Alex and Aaron back on the show because now we've got a pretty solid recording schedule. On Wednesdays is when we're going to be recording these. So as soon as I come back from Pokemon, this is my life from now on, and I'm kind of okay with that. So for the This Week in Geek Loose Cannon video store, we have been
Do You Movie, David Denoyer.
And I've been Mike the Birdman saying, be kind, rewind.
They get you when you sleep. But you can only stay awake so long.
Where are you gonna go? Where are you gonna run? Where are you gonna hide? Nowhere. 'Cause there's no one like you left.
Are either one of these any good? Sir?
What?
Are either one of these any good?
I don't watch movies.
Quick! Change the channel!
You're wasting your life making shit! Nobody cares! These movies are terrible!
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.